afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 9th of January 2018, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. Well, Mike, we needn't worry at all because the BBC is saying very clearly on its website that if you've got no time in the morning, just have a look at this little slot with us, trust us, and you know everything that you need to know. I have put a little tag in the bottom right-hand corner there, or maybe not, just in case people thought that we were encouraging the BBC. But I have to smile at this because as we look through the BBC's report, and we're going to cover a little piece fairly shortly, it becomes ever more obvious that they are simply the mouthpiece of the government as far as political policy goes.
And that extends to cars, of course.
Indeed it does. And this was one of the key articles that caught my eye this morning. So we've got the big headline: diesel car sales to plunge again this year, study warns. So that's, what do you think that headline is going to do to the markets?
Well, I mean, it's been a sustained campaign for quite some time, so I'm quite certain the market is suppressed.
Suppressed and depressed. So we quote, or the BBC quotes an automotive expert, Professor David Bailey. He said that the diesel slow death was being driven by, quote, environmental pressures and consumer confusion.
Yes.
The consumers are confused, apparently. Well, he's not confused because he puts out the government policy. The time is right for the government to take the initiative and offer up scrappage benefits to those who are prepared to ditch their diesels and switch to electric cars. So there's the government policy, which just gets reinforced straight away in the article. But those silly consumers, they're all a bit confused, and we're not sure why. Well, bring in the next bit. It does say this: people within the industry blame anti-diesel rhetoric from the government, which they say has left people confused and worried. To put it bluntly, too many people think if they buy diesels, they'll face tax rises and bans from city centres, or both. Where do we end the article? Diesel car sales fell by almost a third in December after November's budget, which introduced a levy on new diesel cars that failed to meet the latest emissions standards. So the BBC weaves the government policy through the article. Anybody who is thinking of buying a diesel car, reads that article, is certainly going to be, I think, a bit more than confused. They're going to be put off. So this is, what is this? Climate change agenda?
Well, they've, of course, swapped their policy 180 degrees. Not too many years ago, people were being encouraged to buy diesel cars because, of course, they're much more energy dense technology, and therefore you go further on a litre of diesel compared to petrol. But apparently we are too stupid to be able to solve the particulates problem from diesels. But of course, recently the European Union released their big graph showing air quality in cities, and British cities did generally pretty well. So this seems to me to be a load of propaganda with no real scientific backup to it.
There's no scientific analysis of the truth about what's going on here. If your diesel car goes further on a litre, a gallon of fuel, what is the real truth over which of the cars is the worst on emissions? But the BBC doesn't bother with that. We just stick with the policy. So do we trust them on Syria?
No, we don't. No, well, actually, this is a reasonable point from Media Lens here, because Fiona Bruce, they say, was on last night's BBC News at 10, and she used the phrase Syrian government forces backed by Russia in its report on the bombing of northern Syria. And the question that Media Lens is asking is, why does the BBC News not regularly use the phrase Saudi government forces backed by the United States and the United Kingdom when reporting on bombs dropped in Yemen? And I think this is a very interesting point. Could this be because the BBC is no better than a propaganda outlet, Brian?
Well, this is what it is, Mike. So it's becoming exceptionally easy to see what's going on there. We did receive a very nice email from a lady in South Africa yesterday who was saying that actually the BBC rhetoric and the propaganda had been very had been put into force in South Africa. So the same trouble, the stirring up of trouble, the undermining piece have been seen in South Africa. BBC right behind it.
Good stuff. Well, let's stay with Syria, and the announcement from the from the Syrian Ministry of Defence that Israel decided to fly aircraft into Syria at 2:40 a.m. this morning, fire several rockets, also from Lebanese territory, and they hit an area of Damascus. At 4 minutes past 3 in the morning, the Israelis repeated its aggression, as it's being described, by launching 2 ground-to-ground missiles from the occupied Golan area. And at 4:15, they flew more jets, firing 4 rockets from the Tiberias area inside the occupied territories. So this is an attack on Syria. Is Israel and Syria at war? Are they at war with each other, Brian?
Well, not officially, because you don't do it that way anymore. You
Apparently
simply
not.
go to a state of war, but you pretend that you're not at war.
So I wonder where the
Excuse me.
United Nations Security Council is on this one. Apparently silent.
I would imagine so.
Yes. Now, complete change of subject. We'll move over to health. And this report from PNAS on male fertility. And what they're saying is concern has been raised over declining male reproductive health in humans. Our study addresses this issue by extending data showing anti-androgen effects of analgesics, and in this case they're talking about ibuprofen in particular, and suggests that such compounds may be involved in adult male reproductive problems. So what they discovered was that men taking 600 milligrams of ibuprofen every day for as little as 2 weeks, and this is equivalent to 3 ibuprofen pills, over-the-counter pills, were found to have a condition called compensated hypogonadism. Yes, thank you. Where testosterone levels are falling to very low levels. This research was carried out on Danish men aged between 18 and 35 who had no fertility problems before the research was taken out. And after just 2 weeks, they were found to have significant decrease in testosterone. An 18% drop in testosterone, of course. Now, of course, it's not just ibuprofen, because we had Dr. Graham Downing on the programme almost 2 years ago, Brian, and this is what he had to say about paracetamol.
I just put that one in there. It's just like an add-on from the last time we spoke, really, because yet another thing that paracetamol is now being found to cause something not very nice with, and this, in this terms, is fertility. Impair fertility in men. And once again, this is probably one of the most widely prescribed or widely bought medicines in this country, and it's given to kids, obviously, and obviously adults, and a significant percentage of the population have this stuff. So that was just really just a little add-on there for you to.
So there you go. It's not just ibuprofen, and of course, in the first paragraph of the PNAC report, they do say that this is involving analgesics in general, so they focused on ibuprofen in this point, but other research, as we've shown, is focused on paracetamol. These, of course, are commonly used drugs, and it seems like it's amazing to me that this has not been sort of noticed before.
Or more widely reported, but of course we're dealing with big pharma. But,
so anyway, in that UK column news with Graham Downing from 2016, we talked about male fertility. I'll put the link to that in the show notes under the YouTube video and on the UK column website, and also on Facebook after the programme.
Okay. Well, I'll risk it. Testosterone problems, not something that UKIP is
I just put that one in
at the moment. Let's just bring this one up on screen. This is just fascinating. On one hand, we could say, well, it's the mainstream media attacking UKIP again, but I think we've got to say how remarkable that UKIP has chosen a new leader who, if we look at the basic standards in his personal life, are right back where we were with the early days of UKIP and allegations of young East European girls in the party nights out on the town in Brussels. So here's Henry Bolton. Well, it's not just the Sun who's talking about this man cheating on his second wife. In fact, if you read the article, it gets a bit confusing as to which wife is which. But he's now moved on to a 25-year-old model. So is his focus, do you think, Mike, on doing what needs to be done for the country at the moment? Is that his priority, or is it a 25-year-old model? I think we might guess. Telegraph covering this as well. Family of UKIP leader devastated as he swaps his wife for Model 25. And she's an interesting young lady because she's been photographed with Tom Jones, for instance, and other so-called celebrities. But this is the man that Nigel Farage put forward to be the new leader of UKIP. And of course, part of his qualifications to lead UKIP was that he'd got experience of working for the European Union.
Yes.
And particularly in defence and security related matters. So I don't know whether these liaisons could cause any problems on that front at all. Well, what did Nigel Farage have to say? Well, amongst other things, he was on the BBC and he said, well, what does it matter? Because at least this man is being talked about now. So there we are. We've got major success at the top of UKIP. Where's that success come from? Well, it's the man that Nigel Farage put forward. I think we'll leave it there, but I think it shows us that we can't expect UKIP to be really getting to grips with what is going wrong in UK at the moment because they're too busy watching young ladies.
Well, speaking of young ladies, the cabinet reshuffle continues, and we're glad to know that a couple more ladies have been added to the cabinet, or have they? Because actually what we discover is that at the end of the day, we've got less female representation than there was before. But anyway, one of the most intelligent ladies in the Conservative Party, Liz Truss, has been made Chief Secretary to the Treasury. I'm not certain that this fills me with anything other than a sense of dread, Brian, that Liz Truss should become Chief Secretary to the Treasury. But an even better appointment was the appointment of Esther McVey to work in Pension Secretary. Now, of course, this is the same Esther McVey that in 2013 said that in the UK it's right that more people are going to food banks because times are tough. So the person who says that it's right that people are using food banks is now the Work and Pension Secretary. Do you see that ending well?
No.
No. Right. And who else is on the move? Well, Justine Greening has been replaced as Education Secretary by Damien Hines. David Liddington has been moved to the Cabinet Office. And David Gauke replaces Mr. Liddington as Justice Secretary. And Matthew Hancock is no longer Digital Minister. He has been moved, he has become Culture Secretary. Karen Bradley, of course, moved to Northern Ireland, and good luck to her with that one. But of course, sticking with Esther McVey for a second, around the same time that she was suggesting that it's great that people are using food banks, she was absolutely coming out as wanting to be Prime Minister. And so I do wonder, Brian, whether this reshuffle is less about sort of improving the situation with the cabinet and more about getting this so-called next generation of MPs into positions of authority, because these are the chosen people that are going to be vying for the position of Prime Minister in the not too distant future.
Well, that's very interesting, Mike. I wonder whether there's a little bit of prejudice here for blondes, because I noticed that the ladies that have been put forward so far are all blondes. Brunettes not getting a look in the Tory party
Apparently
now.
not.
No. Well, this particular gentleman is Brandon Lewis, and we were intrigued to see that the former policing minister has now been made Tory party chairman and minister without portfolio. So he's really coming into a position of great power in the party. Remember that Gavin Williamson, the chief whip, has been moved over to defence, also a very powerful position. The minister without portfolio role, of course, he's supposed to be a troubleshooter of a type. Yeah, well, I'm sure he is. Mike.
Yes.
Let's just remember why UK Column should be interested in this particular gentleman. Well, let's bring in this open letter to Policing Minister Brandon Lewis with regard to the Metropolitan Police child abuse whistleblower John Wedger. Now, John Wedger went to see Mr. Lewis. He had several meetings with him in his office in Westminster, in which John told Mr. Lewis in great detail what he'd discovered in relation to the cover-up of child abuse in London. John at that stage, indeed he still is, was talking about a cover-up which was involving local authorities, it was involving children's charities, it was involving the Metropolitan Police, and of course it was also involving MPs and members of the establishment. So despite a meeting with the then policing minister, nothing happened. Now, we produced an open letter. Let's just take a couple of paragraphs out of that. In the last few days, this is going back to July 2016, in the last few days, a very brave detective constable from the Met Police, John Wedger, has given a public testimony of the orchestrated cover-up of widespread child abuse, principally in London, but also UK-wide. He describes the nature and scale of the child abuse, including grooming, sexual abuse, prostitution, trafficking and cover-ups involving the police, politicians, local authorities, social services and charities. Please will you, Mr. Lewis, explain under your ministerial responsibilities and duty of care to uphold the law and protect victims, witnesses and whistleblowers, what action you will take to protect this man and to ensure that the serious criminal matters relating to child abuse he raises are addressed, and those guilty of criminal offences and offences relating to public office, such as malfeasance in public office, are brought to justice. Well, did we get a reply? The answer is, of course not. We had no reply at all from Mr. Lewis. There was a wall of silence in relation to this matter. And of course, he did nothing directly, it would appear, for John Wedger either. Although we understand there is an allegation that he did speak personally to Theresa May to talk about this case, but Theresa May did nothing. So isn't it interesting that this man who, through this interaction with John Wedger alone, would be fully in the picture in relation to serious child abuse around the Conservative Party and other politicians in London. But what action does the man take? Apparently nothing. So he's now running the Tory party. Well, we just want to bring in Theresa May because I think it would be wrong if people didn't really get a true picture of this lady. This is obviously from her website. She's very big into children, charities, voluntary groups. There she is hugging the teddy bear. And this is the lady we can trust. But of course, in reality, this is the lady who not only did nothing with the evidence of John Wedger, she's done more than her fair share to make sure that Melanie Shaw, the Nottingham child abuse whistleblower, remains in prison. Melanie has now spent well over 18 months in prison, mostly in solitary confinement, 23.5 hours a day. Picture was of earlier time in Peterborough prison run by Sodexo, when Melanie was denied medical treatment to that particularly aggressive leg ulcer. So who was the lady in power? Well, former Home Secretary, now Prime Minister Theresa May was that lady, quite happy to see a child abuse whistleblower incarcerated in prison, locked up in solitary confinement, denied medical treatment and other privileges. And, medical treatment is a right, but she's been denied privileges as well, such as mail and stamps and clothing. But the important thing is that Melanie is still in prison. She has no idea of the exact charge. She has no idea of the sentence. And she has no idea of the release date. And we know that those latter things, 100% true. This lady is in prison. She doesn't know when she might be released. And of course, Theresa May, as Home Secretary, was the very woman who helped put her there.
Now, quite a number of the mainstream newspapers have chosen the Register, which is maybe somewhere in between mainstream and alternative, to cover this. But parliamentary computers apparently have been, people operating parliamentary computers have been accessing unbelievable amounts of, or attempting to access unbelievable amounts of pornography from Parliament. And this is following a Freedom of Information, or a series of Freedom of Information requests that went in from the Press Association. The requests were made between June and October 2017, and they revealed that 24,473 attempts had been made to reach porn sites from parliamentary computers. I believe there are 850 parliamentary computers on this list, but this also might include people that have brought in mobile phones that are using the parliamentary Wi-Fi network. So what else did they say? They said that there had been a dramatic drop-off in the number of requests to porn sites between 2015 and 2016. So 2015, if you take that 12-month period, there had been 213,020 attempts to access pornography sites from Parliament, and in 2016, 113,208 attempts. Now, parliamentary IT staff claim that all porn websites are blocked from within Parliament on the parliamentary network. So I'm finding this report extremely confusing. They're saying that, as it's been reported, they're saying that it may not have been intentional that these websites were trying to be accessed. So what was on the network then? Some kind of malware that was causing these connection attempts? And then the other question is that if these porn sites are blocked by the parliamentary IT systems, then how did porn end up in Damien Green's computer? So there are questions arise from this that aren't answered by the reports here, and I think there's some further work required to get to the bottom of this.
What I'm not clear on, Mike, is who within Westminster who would investigate this. Surely this is a police matter, isn't it?
Well, no, it's not illegal to access. It may be an employment matter, but it's not illegal to access pornography websites.
Right.
They are legal if you're over 18, and it's legal content. So there's no suggestion in this that they were attempting to access child porn websites or any kind of illegal content. This is legal content. But of course, you've got to ask about the morality of the people that are involved.
The climate.
Yes.
Yeah. And then when a Metropolitan police officer comes forward and gives testimony of the trafficking and sexual abuse of children, indeed the death of children and the resulting cover-up, the same Westminster doesn't give him any help at all.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's have a look at this one then. You were talking about John Wedger and his attempts that were sort of stopped by other police officers to expose child abuse and so on. Well, here's a policeman that was caught and admitted to having 1,500 images of child sex abuse. The judge in his case decided that he should go free, Brian, because the judge took pity on him. He said that the police officer involved was in a state of considerable isolation. And so we've got to feel sorry for him, and he's got to walk free.
Well, Melanie Shaw is in a state of isolation at the moment as a result of being a victim.
And she's not getting to walk free.
She's not getting to walk
free.
No.
Could it be, and I have no evidence for this whatsoever, but could it be that she doesn't know the requisite handshake?
I think it's worse than that. I think she knows who is involved. I think she is seen as a huge threat to Westminster and particularly to some MPs in the Midlands.
So just to put this in context, this man had 23 what are described as Category A images, which involve child rape. He had 26 Category B and 1,368 Category C images. I don't see how that's possibly justifiable that he should go free.
It's an interesting question.
What's going on with the Navy, Brian?
Well, those nasty Russians are sending ships up the channel. So
again?
Yes. Well, it's something that's happened quite routinely over the years because ships do come up and down the English Channel. But the Daily Mail here says it's a red alert. The Royal Navy scrambles frigate to intercept 4 Russian naval ships sailing through the English Channel.
What chance would a single Royal Navy frigate have against 4 Russian ships?
Well, probably not a lot, but I think they're unlikely to have a pitched battle in the English Channel, Mike. But this is simply the standby ship being called to go out and track these ships. This is absolutely routine in the Cold War days, it was happening all the time. It's been happening since. But all of a sudden, you see the whole thing being ramped up. So here it is. The Royal Navy has repeatedly had to send ships out to meet Russian vessels in recent months amid growing militarism from the Kremlin. So they cannot resist this dig. Of course, what's the policy? The policy at the moment is those nasty Russians. And so here are the media putting out the government policy that it's all the Russians. Everything is the fault of the Russians. So I just can't help putting in those nasty Russians because it helps brings it down. But let's bring in the Defence Secretary because he's had some very strong words to say. He says this. He says, I will not hesitate in defending our waters or tolerate any form of aggression.
That's brilliant. Can we just send him out in a dinghy?
Well, I suspect he's going to be one of the last people to actually go out there and defend the country. But it's the use of this word, I will do it.
Yeah.
So I've called him Spider-Man. If you don't understand what that refers to, this is the man who kept a particularly large and unpleasant spider in a cage on his desk in Westminster, which frightened some of his staff. This is the man who holds all the dirty little secrets as Chief Whip, and now he's been put in charge of defence. I will not hesitate. What's he been doing in the background? Well, this is our words, really, but make no mistake, I'm helping defend this nation by selling another fully operational RN warship, HMS Ocean, to Brazil for peanuts. But don't worry, the money will be reinvested in defence. We've spent 65 million on Ocean's refit, but they're paying us 84 million. So that money's going back into the defence pot. So the Russians, as you can understand, Mike, are pretty terrified at what's going on with that deal.
I'm sure they are.
They are. But what is this man really doing? Well, he's helping to hide the fact that EU military unification is continuing apace. It's taken the local Plymouth paper, the Herald here, to come up with the interesting story that Babcock is bidding for the 1.25 billion contract to build the Type 31E frigates. And Babcock is saying that if they win, at least some of the sections of ships can be built in Devonport, which will help keep the base open. But the clue here is in the title, because Type 31E, sorry, there's an additional T there, Type 31E frigate, the E stands for export. So this is not being seen as let's get the Royal Navy up and running properly. This is how can we sell these frigates overseas? And then, of course, you find that this isn't a British build anyway, because this is going to be with the French company Thales, and they are in the background as part of the 31E team.
So these are for export. Well, presumably they can only export them to cold water countries, Iceland, places like this.
Well, if they work, they might find somebody to take them, and presumably these will work in warm water, although we still don't know about the Type 45s.
Well, I mean, the water at Plymouth has got to be warmer than the Clyde, so maybe there's a better chance.
Yeah. Main point here is that this is continuing EU integrated defence policy. And here we've got Johnny Mercer, one of the local Plymouth MPs, and of course he had a background of a few years in the army. He's now very big on defence, but Mr Mercer still can't quite understand what's going on, Mike. He said in his tweets that he's been a bit confused as to what's happening.
Oh.
So we're in the European Union, we're not leaving, there is no exit in Brexit. And one of the ways we know that is Theresa May, of course, is linking us in very strongly into the unified EU military structure, but that's all a bit confusing for Johnny Mercer. Hope he hasn't got a diesel car, because the poor man won't know whether he's coming or going.
Indeed. So, what's this?
Well, sorry, this is just another one for Mr. Williamson. I couldn't resist it from the Telegraph, because there he is. He's apparently going to get more money from the Treasury. The sign in front of him says it's only qualified operators that should operate the machinery, and I'm not sure he's capable of dealing with the Treasury, because what he's spinning is the great lie, of course, there is no money.
Yes. Well, Jean-Claude Juncker saying that there's going to be no second EU referendum, and basically saying that anything that Tony Blair has been saying recently is a load of nonsense. But where was he speaking? Well, he was speaking at the European Union budget presentation. So he's presenting the new EU budget, which of course I'm sure will remain unaudited. Well, he said he was complaining that with Britain leaving, and he said he just doesn't think Britain can be, that Brexit can be put out to the voters again. That he just doesn't believe it. But he said that it doesn't. While there's going to be a shortfall in the EU budget once Britain leaves, of course we're not leaving, so there won't be. But this is just part of the negotiating position that's being established here. He's saying that once Britain leaves, there's going to be a shortfall in the EU's finances of £15.8 billion, which is I suppose about 18 billion euros or so. And he's saying that they don't have any more cash to finance extras. But then later on in the speech, he was saying that Europe costs the European taxpayer 1 cup of coffee a day. That's all. So I'm not really certain how you can equate those two positions. We don't have any money, but it's not costing the taxpayer very much. So surely the taxpayer can just pay a little bit more. No?
Or the banks can just create a bit more out of nothing.
Indeed. But in the meantime, Brexit with no exit continues. And of course, part of that is the trade bill. So the UK apparently has not had its own trade policy for 40 years. And they have pushed through, or they're in the process of pushing through the trade bill. It gets a second reading in Parliament today. It's going to do things like establish a trade remedies authority. And if anybody's paying any attention, you might, in fact, notice that there's some aspects to this new trade bill which are similar to TTIP. And this is exactly the point that I've been making for about 2 years now. The TTIP, as per David Cameron's Best of Both World documents, is and has been and always will be at the heart of Britain's trade policy. And the fact that TTIP has basically failed doesn't mean that Britain is going to drop the ideas that are embodied within TTIP. So this is the trade bill. And in fact, I did notice one Guardian article, one commentator in the Guardian noticing that there were some aspects of TTIP within this. So lots of concern about this and not too many people paying attention. Brian, this is all part of Britain's new, or Theresa May's new #Global Britain policy. The assumption here is that once this trade bill goes through, that that there are 20 nations that have trade agreements with the European Union, and that following Brexit with no exit, that Britain is just going to be able to trade with those 20 nations as if it had never left the European Union. Well, there's only two ways that can possibly happen. One way is, no, sorry, I rephrase that. There's only one way that can possibly happen. That's if we don't actually leave.
Yes.
Yes. So the clue there should be clear. And there's not really much more to say about this, but this bill is really, really important, and people have got to start paying attention to it.
I'll just say, remarkable that we haven't been able to trade for 40 years because we haven't had any legislation in place to enable us to trade. So we're now going to become an independent global trading nation with a set of rules. So we won't be independent. We're going to be restricted by the rules.
This of course is the other point. This is part of the spin here. They're suggesting that now we're going to have some independent rules, and from now on all our trading is going to be done our way. No, because there's another party in the trade agreement, and you've got to follow the rules. The EU is bigger than us, and therefore they're going to set the rules for any future trading agreement with the UK.
Perhaps we should be honest with our audience at this stage and say that as we looked at the news this morning, it is becoming so bizarre and so incredible what's actually taking place. It can be quite difficult to decide how to put some of this across. So if you detect a slight black humour at the back of today's news, it's because how do you take what the government is doing at the moment seriously? I'd just like to jump back to Mike's slide yesterday on the new police watchdog. I looked at with fascination at this picture as the news was taking place, and people were talking about robo-cops and rollerball, which of course is absolutely correct. So this is the state of Britain's police, but this is the front end, this is the aggressive front end. Something else is happening in the background, and that's the use of social media. And somebody pushed through to us this morning a tweet which has come from Devon and Cornwall's very own, Devon and Cornwall Police's very own Sergeant Tangy. This is a man who spends what appears to be hundreds, if not thousands of hours tweeting. Some of this is apparently done officially for Devon and Cornwall Police. He's even travelled to Florida to take part in international policing discussions on putting out information on social media. But what our viewer picked up is that this is another one where you almost get the impression that Sergeant Tangy is flaunting the use of firearms. And what's the statement in that tweet? It says, "Just in case you're wondering, we are on patrol. No cautions can be issued. Total zero tolerance policy." What does that actually mean, do you think, Mike? Does that mean that if Sergeant Tangy decides he's going to shoot somebody, he's just going to do it?
I think in the context of the image, and for our listeners, the image is a young lady, and it says behind her, New Year's Resolution Police, and she's holding a gun outstretched. So that I can't see that. Total zero tolerance policy with somebody holding a gun, that can only mean one thing. You don't do what we say, we're going to shoot you.
Yeah. And remember that this is a man who loves carting around automatic weapons. This is another one of his tweets here. And if you can't make out the picture, there's a man sort of doubled up on the ground. He's naked from the waist up. He's got his hands handcuffed behind his back. And Sergeant Tangy's comment is, "Man stripping shirt off. They think I look well odd. Police looking on. What a idiot." So we don't know the circumstance of this, but we got a member of the public face pressed into the concrete ground with two officers stood over the top. We don't know, has this man got mental health problems? Has he been ill? Is he ill? But look at that response from Sergeant Tangy. This is the man who loves posting pictures of himself with guns. And money, of course, is making, or the shortage of money, causing the changes in the police, the NHS and many other institutions. I'll just draw you to this video, a little bit of black humour really, but somebody pointed out that we might like to look at this. It's essentially looking at Charlize Theron and her role as an international model, particularly with Christian Dior products. So that's the lady on the left. We've got John Galliano, who's orchestrated some of the Dior ads, and he's in a little bit of trouble at the moment. But I couldn't help notice that we had Miss Lagarde over here. So I thought this is extremely interesting. The video shows some other clips of her. This one I liked a lot because she's got a cow's death head brooch on her black coat. I'm not sure the significance of that. But the man centre has caused big trouble because he's had some pretty outrageous things on camera and on social media, including that people talking to him would have been gassed if Hitler had been in post. There doesn't seem to be any clampdown on Dior's social media or his social media, Mike.
Right.
That's still standing. So if you want to have a look at that video, you might be very interested in the analysis of the adverts and the ceremony in those adverts, but you can also see for yourself and hear who said what. But encouraging to see the big banking interests such as IMF tied in with this sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's it for today's news. We'll say thank you very much to all our viewers for joining us. Thank you for those who have given donations. If you're not yet a subscriber for UK Column, please consider taking out a subscription to enable us to do more, because that's the objective for 2018, is not to continue just what we've been doing over the last few years, but we are very keen to expand things. And indeed, many of the viewers and listeners are asking for additional material to be covered. we can only do that with some expansion and the support of others. So if you're not a subscriber, please take out a subscription or consider making a donation. That's it for today. We will be back at the same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.